and then you've got their barristers and solicitors, and you're getting recorded, and you're sworn into it. And literally, it's like you're walking in as a criminal. The only thing that's not there is a handcuff. And you can't have a lawyer next to you.
You can, but they're not. They're there for just support.
Just support and giving you, advice, I guess. But that's about it. They can't speak on behalf of you. They can't.
And how strong is that support kind of taken into account? Or would it be just as good having your mum there as a support? Is there that legal support? Does that have a bigger weight?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have any bigger weight because they're not there to question the actual legality of the process. They're just there to make sure it's running smoothly, or you have a shoulder to cry on. So might as well have my mom rather than them.
Okay, well, thanks for explaining all of that. I hope that's getting a bit clearer for listeners, because these are certainly terminologies that I feel are incredibly important for people working in this area, subjected to this scrutiny, to really understand.
Yeah, and just on a final point, it's just to understand that this has got nothing to do with you as a clinician. It's got all to do with administrative process. It's about what service have you provided, was that warranted, and the money that you received was warranted or not. And often, because of the amount of relevance they put on clinical, a lot of doctors feel like once they're on this bandwagon, they're bad doctors or they did something wrong. It's actually not.
Okay, so let's just elaborate on that point then. There's another acronym of which we know well, obviously called APRA, and the medical board.
Correct.
So, can you just differentiate where the PRP PSR sits?
Sure.
And where APRA sits? And what you're clearly saying at the moment is there is a difference, is that right?
Absolutely. So basically, both organizations are there to actually make sure that public interest is upheld, to make sure scarce resource, et cetera, is there for the public. But the difference is PSR, PRP is really about the billing, and if you have received that money right or wrong. Now, the PSR and PRP both have the power to refer you, though, to APRA, which is the regulatory body that governs whether you as a clinician are, delivering care that's safe and sound and evidence-based for the public. And then APRA obviously has the right to interrogate you and prosecute you in accordance with the national law and in accordance with the regulations put forward by the Medical Board of Australia. So there are two different entities. Yes, they interrelate because obviously the director of PSR, et cetera, can refer you to the Medical Board if they feel during their interrogation they've identified any, practice or statements you've made which may question the ability of you being whatever clinician you are. But their scope is certainly not about the clinical scope or clinical, goodness of you as a clinician.
Okay, so when a doctor goes into this process, and particularly when they don't understand these acronyms, which you've now very nicely explained, what are they going through emotionally? I hear there is, and I see regularly, a commonality in terms of an immediate judgment on themselves as practitioners.
Yes.
And also, what I've come to learn is a form of anxiety.
Correct.
Which is I could loosely call it audit anxiety.
That's right.
Does that happen? Is that real?
Look, Joyce, that was the question that I asked myself because I personally had that. And as a matter of fact, I had to move on. I was terminated from my position. My peers isolated me. I had self-doubt myself of, did I do the right thing or not?
Hang on, but you were terminated. Have you received formal judgment?
No, not at all.
And you terminated pre-judgment?
Pre-judgment, based on the fact that my peers were fearful that because I was on the bandwagon, they will get on the bandwagon.
So it was a protective response?
Correct, yeah, on their commercial point of view, yes. And you know what, in regards to your question about just answering your question, is there Medicare audit anxiety? I have now conducted an independent national survey which actually shows, and the results are compelling. We've got over 150 clinicians all over the country who have participated in this survey, and guess what? Over 90% of clinicians in Australia are saying that they are withholding essential care to patients in fear of Medicare audit anxiety.
Well, hang on. They're withholding care to the patient.
Correct. I'll give you an example, Joyce, and you would be able to relate to this so well. For example, if a doctor has to go through this entire rigmarole based on their subspecial interest in, say, chronic pain, and they're prescribing more opioids, let's say, compared to the general public of doctors around them that never deal with chronic pain patients, what do you think the doctor's going to end up doing? They'll end up stopping prescribing opioids. And guess what? All of a sudden, you've got this whole big cohort of patients who will lose their general practitioner who normally would be supplying them and supporting them through their pain program.
So unfortunately, it's not a very proactive move. It's going to result in some very reactive responses as such.
Absolutely, because obviously doctors do need to make a living. Doctors are fearful of the fact that this process can actually end their means of making a living. And justifiably, they will become cautious of it. And I guess my argument in the recent article I've published and the recent legal action that I'm about to take is that this actually is a bigger picture situation where it's actually causing Medicare audit anxiety, which in essence is causing public health interest issue. It's withholding care to the public, and the public don't know about it.
Well, we certainly don't need our medical doctors to play such a central role to be phobic of practicing well, do we?
Absolutely. We are trained to be healthcare professionals. We know how to provide quality care. I'm not actually supporting the truly routine doctors, or I'm not supporting over-servicing at all. Absolutely, you need to be accountable for what you're doing. You need to think twice before you order pathology or you prescribe medication. Of course you do, but essentially the way it's actually being scrutinized, that the whole process is wrong. And can I just say that the essence of it is that, guess what, Joyce, at the moment in Australia, there are no standards or benchmarks that are peer-reviewed, agreed, and endorsed as being the benchmark for which doctors should be working against and should be judged against.
So it's really quite arbitrary and quite up to the individual who's judging the doctor as such.
That's right. It's actually the actual term is according to the general population of the general practitioners, according to their opinion, if they think the conduct or the billing was not right, then they are deemed to be not right. And moreover, you're not even able to, according to the law itself, you're not even able to access previous findings, Joyce. You can't actually access it because it's actually forbidden by law for the doctors. Like, for example, I can't tell you what I've been taught and told and, reprimanded or whatever during my hearing, because unless I want to go to jail for 12 months, because that's the penalty if I talk about it. So how are clinicians supposed to have any guarantee of consistency when it comes to being judged when, first of all, we don't have standards and benchmarks that are agreed on, and second of all, we don't have access to precedential cases.
Right, okay. Well, that certainly sets the scene for us. Let's go to the public interest for a start, because ultimately healthcare is to serve the public well.
Yep.
It is to keep them safe. It is to make sure that whatever they're doing or that we're recommending, that somehow there's some sort of effectiveness to it.
That's right.
So I suppose my question is whether the public are aware of this or not, and should they be?
Well, first of all, absolutely. They need to be aware of it. I'm a very big advocate of validating and empowering the public to take onus for their health care. You are actually asking for a service to be given to you, and you should know that what quality you are getting. And people and by all means, PSR, PRP, APRA, they all have their space. We need people like that, of course. We need to keep an eye on the scarce resource to make sure it's actually not used in the wrong way. However, the whole point is, though, in regards to the public, you would like to think that there's some consistency in the standard of care. So, for example, when you go to a GP and you spend 15 minutes with them and you get a service, that should be at a certain level that's acceptable. Now, at the moment, the only sort of benchmark or policing of that standard is done when someone's dobbed in or someone bills a lot or when someone just coincidentally comes under the radar of Medicare. Doctors are not actually accountable unless they actually go through this rigmarole of interrogation. What I am suggesting is that it should be done on every single consult. Everybody should be accountable.
So, as in, prevent the misconduct, so to speak.
That's right.
And have a standard of conduct.
That's right.
So that standard practice is not as varied for the public who are accessing it.
Correct.
No matter the business model the practice as such.
Correct. And that the clinicians know that when they are making sure that they're hitting those published standards, they are, I guess, indemnified against any of these interrogations so they can do their job properly. And then whatever they do above and beyond that is their own forte. That's fine.
So I suppose standards like that, while they're currently not available, and I take it that's the point you're trying to raise, to promote the fact that we do need to have these sort of standards, that would certainly give clinician a lot more confidence in practice.
Correct. And what I'm suggesting is to take that standards, benchmarking, etc., away from the government's hand and create an independent health and ethics board as such, where there's input from the colleges, input from the public, input from people like yourself, Joyce, that practice in areas of special interest, where we create the standard away from government or political influence, which is the benchmark that the government can rely on.
So does APRA not do that now?
The APRA is part of the government, so it's not independent. It's owned by the government. It's delegated powers of the government.
Okay, so just to finish up, one more question. In terms of, let's look at other professions within the community, other professions of similar caliber.
Sure.
What do they do over there in terms of how they have some sort of standardization? Is that really, even available away from the medical fraternity?
Sure.
What happens in other professions?
Absolutely, Joyce. And the thing is, there's already documented and evidenced systems like this in, say, the accounting profession or, say, the engineering profession. For example, if your house, tears apart and falls apart after you build it, the engineers, the drafters, the architects, etc., they're all subjected to a review based on what they call the Australian Standards of Engineering. That's all codified and that's all standardized. So we know that that's the benchmark that they should have met. If they didn't meet that, they get interrogated and prosecuted. So that's a simple example. Accounting's the same. There's, CPA, there's all these sort of independent boards where there's ethics and there's double check and triple checking of what they're doing and what they're not doing within the fraternity itself, which then talks about self-regulating and remediating and preventing complications.
Okay, well that's really taught me a lot today. I hope it's taught or given at least some insight to the listeners. Thank you so much for explaining that in such great detail.
No worries. Thanks, Joyce. And please, I would encourage anybody to let's communicate and see if we can help each other.
And you're very accessible, clearly, Dr. Karmakar.
Sure, absolutely.
So, encourage people to reach out and start to have a democratic conversation about this.
That's right. A conversation and a debate. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.